They left me in a country I didn't speak the language, with no money, no passport, and no clue how to get home. And they didn't even pretend to feel bad. My daughter's husband looked me dead in the eye and said, "Just stay here, Mom. We'll be right back." Then they drove off. Hi, my name is Carol, and if you think you've heard a story like this before, you haven't. Because the man who abandoned me, he had no idea the invisible old woman he dumped was once the CEO of a company worth 8 figures. And I was about to show him exactly what a quiet woman with deep pockets and a long memory could do. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit that subscribe button and tap like if stories like mine speak to your heart. And tell me in the comments, what part of the world are you watching from? I'd love to know where my story reaches. Now, let me take you back to the day it all began. I was never supposed to go on that trick. It was my daughter Ashley's second honeymoon, a romantic reset, she said, after a rocky few years with her husband, Brandon. But a week before they left, she called me sounding frantic. "Mom, our sitter backed out. We need you." "To watch the boys?" I asked. No, we want you to come with us. You'll love it. Greece, then Italy. We'll have time as a couple and you can rest and enjoy yourself. You deserve it." She sounded so excited and tired and hopeful. So I said yes. What I didn't know was that this wasn't about giving me rest. It was about giving them freedom from me. From the first day of the trip, I could feel the tension. Ashley was sweet but distant. Brandon was, well, Brandon. He never liked me, said I was too opinionated, said I asked too many questions, said I hovered. But I never told them the truth, that I'd funded half their wedding, that my inheritance paid for their first house, that even the fancy hotels they were now staying in were charged to a platinum card in my name. Because I didn't want them to feel like they owed me. I just wanted to be part of their lives. We arrived in a picturesque little town off the Amalfi Coast. I'd seen it in movies. Colorful houses stacked on cliffs, lemon trees in every direction, and a breeze that smelled like salt and heaven. "Mom," Brandon said casually at breakfast, "Ashley and I want to do a day trip, just the two of us. Is that okay?" "Of course," I smiled. "I can relax here, maybe walk through the town a bit." "Perfect," he said, setting down his espresso. "We'll leave you here. The hotel's lovely. Just stay put." He kissed me on the cheek. Ashley hugged me, quick, distant, and then they were gone. I waited. For hours. I sat in the hotel lobby, drank 2 cappuccinos, read half a book, walked the gardens, waited. When the sun dipped behind the cliffs, I started to worry. I asked the concierge if they'd left any message. He looked confused. "Madam, they checked out." "What?" He showed me the record. Brandon had checked out of both rooms. There was no note, no explanation, only a charged bill and 2 vanished guests. And then it hit me. I went to my purse. My passport? Gone. My wallet? Gone. Only a lipstick and a pack of tissues remained. I stumbled outside, dizzy. My knees shook. My head spun. This couldn't be happening. Who does this? To their mother-in-law? To their mother? Was this a mistake? Maybe they forgot. Maybe they left it with the front desk. Maybe they... And then I saw the car. It was their rental, just past the corner, unlocked. I opened the glove box. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typed, clean, with Brandon's smug tone practically oozing from it. "Carol, we felt it was best for everyone to have some space. You'll be fine here. The hotel is prepaid for 1 more night. Please don't make a fuss. Brandon." I sat down on the stone steps, holding that piece of paper. I wasn't angry yet. I was stunned. Not because they left, but because they thought they could. They thought I'd stay quiet, that I was helpless, that I'd just sit there and cry. But I didn't. I stood up, brushed the dust from my pants, and smiled. Because I remembered who I was, and Brandon had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Then, in a new chapter, I make my first call, not to the police, but to someone who owed me a favor from 20 years ago. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear. Adrenaline, memory, rage, the clean kind, not noisy or violent, the kind that slides into your bloodstream and makes you dangerously calm. I folded Brandon's little farewell letter and slid it into my purse like a receipt I'd be returning later. Then I pulled out the only thing he hadn't taken, my phone. Sure, the international SIM was on, probably yanked when they swiped my wallet, but they didn't know I kept my old American SIM card tucked behind the case, along with something else. A card. Black. Titanium, with no name on the front, only a logo most people don't even recognize. Brandon had no idea who I was, that I'd sold my logistics firm 8 years ago for over $20 million and kept almost all of it, quiet, clean, and out of family drama. He thought I was just Carol the grandma. He thought I was a problem to get rid of. Well, now I was a problem with a grudge. First, I walked calmly back to the hotel desk. The concierge, a young man named Mateo, looked at me with a puzzled smile. "Señora, are you all right?" I handed him the black card. His eyes widened. "Ah, of course, of course. Would you like to speak to the manager?" "No," I said gently. "I'd like a room, not the one I had before. Something nicer, with a view." He blinked, then nodded rapidly. "Yes, señora, right away." And just like that, the world shifted. In less than 20 minutes, I was sitting in a suite with arched windows, a view of the sea, and lemon-scented towels folded like swans. And I made my first call. Not to the police, not to my daughter, to someone I hadn't spoken to in 17 years. "Carol?" came the voice on the other end, warm and familiar. It made me smile. "Hi, Jules," I said. "I need a small favor." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "You sound like you're about to buy a country." "Not today," I smiled. "Just need a car, a driver, and someone discreet who knows the coast." "Still in Italy?" "Amalfi." "Oof, what did they do? Leave you on a boat?" "Worse, left me at a hotel and took my passport." There was silence. Then, "Give me 20 minutes." Julian worked in private security now, old school, sharp as ever. We'd met back when I was building freight routes through Central America and needed someone who could navigate the politics without leaving bodies behind. He owed me, and he paid his debts. 30 minutes later, a sleek, dark car pulled up to the back entrance of the hotel. Out stepped a woman in sunglasses and linen. "Mrs. Wallace?" "That's me." She handed me a fresh phone, a temporary ID, and a thin folder. Inside were printouts of Brandon's social media, travel history, known contacts, and, bless her, a map of the local wine bars he tagged over the past 48 hours. "You'll want this," she said, tapping the folder. "Looks like he's in Positano, with your daughter, under a different hotel reservation." Of course he was. I didn't go after them that night. I had dinner alone, with fresh pasta, a bottle of house red, and a violinist playing just out of earshot. I watched the sea reflect the stars and let the anger burn off slowly. I wasn't here for revenge. Not yet. First, I wanted to see how far Brandon would go, and just how long Ashley would follow him before she realized what kind of man she married. I had time. And patience, and enough money to make this the most expensive lesson of Brandon's life. But let me pause here, because I know what you're probably thinking. Why didn't I call Ashley immediately? Why not confront them? I could have. But something inside me whispered, let them believe you're still helpless. That's when people reveal who they truly are. And sure enough, they did. In New Chapter, I arrive in Positano, and let's just say Brandon didn't expect to see me again, especially not like that. Positano was everything the travel blogs promised. Brightly painted houses stacked like a rainbow across the cliffside, bougainvillea spilling from balconies, scooters zipping past with joyful chaos. It smelled like sea breeze, espresso, and something just a little too sweet, like vacation on a postcard. But I wasn't there for vacation. I was there for the show, and Brandon and Ashley were about to perform. Jolien's contact had secured me a room at a boutique hotel tucked into the hillside, just above the one where Brandon was staying. It had a private terrace, marble floors, and the kind of staff who didn't ask questions, just smiled and said, "Yes, Senora." From my room, I could see their balcony below. 2 chairs, 1 bottle of wine. No guilt. And that's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I was going to observe them. Let them get comfortable. Let them talk. Let them slip up. I didn't need to catch them in a lie. I needed them to reveal themselves, the way people do when they think they've gotten away with something. That evening, I dressed carefully. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just refined. Soft cream slacks, a silk blouse, a scarf I'd bought in Milan years ago. Minimal makeup, pearls, polished, invisible, until I wasn't. I reserved a table at a quiet restaurant Brandon had posted about on Instagram. His caption, "Most romantic risotto ever. Sorry, not sorry." So predictable. I arrived early, took the corner table with the best view, ordered a glass of wine and pretended to read. And then they arrived. I felt them before I saw them. Brandon's voice had that smug hum, the one he used when he felt powerful. Ashley's laugh was quieter, tired. They were seated diagonally across the patio. Not close, not far, just visible. Brandon didn't see me, at first. But as the waiter passed, his eyes swept the room and landed on me. Our eyes met. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply raised my glass. One smooth movement, regal, silent. His face went white. He leaned toward Ashley, whispering something. She turned, but I looked away, just in time. Let them wonder. Let them feel the unease of seeing someone they thought was left behind, not only alive, but glowing. Let them sweat. The waiter returned to my table. "Would you like to order, Senora?" "Yes," I said, "but not from this menu." He tilted his head, confused. I handed him a handwritten card, prearranged with the chef. A dish not on the menu, but one I knew Brandon would recognize. Lobster risotto, the same one I had flown in a private chef to make that night. When it arrived, the scent wafted toward their table. Brandon turned. I saw his jaw twitch. And then the waiter brought him his food, a touristy plate of overcooked pasta and undercooked arrogance. I didn't speak to them that night, didn't approach, didn't wave, didn't explain. I simply dined like a woman who had every right to be there, because I did. When I stood to leave, I caught Ashley's eyes. For a split second, she looked unsure. Not guilty, just confused. And maybe, somewhere in her, a flicker of something else. Regret? I didn't stop, just walked past their table, heels silent on the tile, scarf fluttering slightly in the breeze. Brandon looked frozen. Ashley blinked. And I kept walking. Back at my hotel, I poured myself a nightcap, looked down at their balcony. They were arguing. He gestured wildly. She folded her arms. He stormed inside. She stayed out, rubbing her temples. I took a sip and whispered, "Good." Because this wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was disruption. And the best part? They still had no idea just how deep the current ran. In New Chapter, I pay a little visit to the hotel they're staying in, and what I learn makes everything crystal clear. The next morning, I rose early. The sun had barely kissed the sea, casting golden lines across the tiled floor of my suite, but I was already dressed, calm, purposeful. Today, I wasn't waiting. Today, I was moving. I took my espresso on the terrace, then slipped quietly down the hill, my sandals soft against the cobblestone. I carried a silk scarf, sunglasses, and an expression so neutral, no one would suspect a thing. I was headed to the hotel where Brandon and Ashley were staying. It was one of those overly modern, overly sleek places, glass, concrete, and trendy discomfort. You could always tell when a hotel was designed for Instagram, not people. At the reception desk, I smiled at the young woman. "Good morning," I said. "My daughter is staying here, but I think I may have left something in her room when I visited yesterday. Is she in room 314? She hesitated. "I'm sorry, Signora, we can't give out room numbers." "Oh, of course," I said kindly. "But you see, I arranged the room as a gift. I have the booking confirmation right here." I showed her the screenshot Julian had prepared, a reservation under a different name, but tied to my corporate account. Brandon had used a fake guest name, likely to keep me from finding them, but the billing trail, it still led to me. She blinked, looked at the file, then her eyes softened. "Oh, I see. You're the Mrs. Wallace." I smiled gently. "Yes, dear, I just need a moment." 5 minutes later, I was in the hallway outside room 314. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. Because right then, a housekeeper came out of the room with a small cart, and her eyes widened as she saw me. "You are the mama?" she asked softly. I nodded. She glanced back toward the room, then leaned toward me. "They leave many papers," she whispered, "and, how you say, money talk. I clean, but I see. I not read, but see cards, hotels, big man plans." I reached into my purse and placed a folded bill in her hand. "Thank you," I said. "That's all I needed to know." She smiled, nodded once, and rolled her cart down the hall. Back in my room, I spread out the items Julian's assistant had gathered. She was good, I'll give her that. Bank records, socials, threads from a private forum Brandon used to talk business with other mid-tier grifters. And then, a voice memo, downloaded from an app he used to record brilliant ideas he thought he'd one day monetize. "We ditch the old lady after the Amalfi stop, make it look gentle, tell her we're coming right back. She can't do much without a passport. Worst case, she flies home on her own dime. Best case, she stays put and stops meddling." My hand clenched into a fist. That wasn't a slip-up. That was a plan. And then it hit me. This trip wasn't romantic. It was a soft push-out, a strategy to isolate me and remove the only obstacle between Brandon and whatever control he wanted over Ashley's life. Over my daughter's life. He saw me as deadweight, as a nuisance, as disposable. He wanted me gone before Ashley ever noticed what kind of man he really was. But here's the thing about underestimating an older woman. We've already seen it all. We've already been betrayed, insulted, abandoned, and we learned how to rise anyway. What Brandon didn't know was that I'd built a company from nothing while raising a child, that I negotiated contracts tougher than he'd ever read, that I never forgot what people said when they thought I wasn't listening. And now I was listening very, very closely. That evening, I didn't go out. I sat quietly on my balcony, sipping mint tea, watching the lights flicker on below. Ashley came out onto their patio. She was barefoot, wrapped in a robe, holding a book, but not reading it. She just sat there, staring into the distance, her face soft, her brow furrowed, like something didn't sit right. I wanted to go to her, hold her, ask her, warn her, but not yet. Not until I knew if she'd already chosen his side. Because the next move would change everything. Some people shout when they're angry. Others slam doors or write furious texts. Me? I buy silence with calm. I cut deeper with kindness. And sometimes I send flowers. That morning, I walked into a little florist tucked between two cafes in the heart of Positano, the kind with lavender-scented air, hand-painted tiles, and a radio playing Italian love songs from the 60s. "Buongiorno," I said. The woman behind the counter smiled. "Buongiorno, signora. For romance?" "Something more reflective," I replied, "for a man who recently made a terrible mistake." I asked for white peonies, soft, elegant, impossible to ignore, with a sprig of rosemary for memory, and one sprig of rue, old-world symbolism for regret. She arranged them beautifully, then handed me the card. I didn't hesitate. "For Brandon. I'm sure you didn't expect to see me again. Consider this a gentle reminder. I'm always watching. Carol Wallace." No mom, no mother-in-law, just my full name. I paid in cash, tipped generously, and made sure the delivery was scheduled for that afternoon, just before their couple's massage. Back at the hotel, I waited. Not at the window, not pacing. I was on a video call with my investment manager in New York, sipping iced mint tea. "Shall I move the Italian assets to the front-facing branch?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "and I'll need the villa account reactivated, quietly." He paused. "That hasn't been used in nearly a decade." "I know, but I think it's time I reminded myself, and others, who I am." Around 3:15, I finally saw him. Brandon came storming out of their hotel, clutching the flower box like it had bitten him. His face was flushed, his eyes darted side to side, scanning the street. Then he pulled out his phone. I watched him dial. Mine buzzed almost instantly. Blocked number, of course. I picked up. "Carol?" he hissed. "Hello, Brandon." Calm, neutral. Why are you here? What is this?" "Oh, you got the flowers? You sent that message? Are you insane?" "I just wanted to say hello. After all, you left so quickly. I barely had time to thank you for the lovely breakfast." He exhaled hard. "Listen." "No, Brandon. You listen." Silence. "I'm not here to cause drama. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to give you a chance to think about your next move very, very carefully." "Are you threatening me?" I laughed softly. "Of course not. But let me ask you this." I paused. "Do you think Ashley knows why you left me behind?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I ended the call. That evening, I watched as Brandon and Ashley sat in stiff silence on their balcony. She looked upset. He looked caged. Whatever excuse he'd given, it wasn't working. Good. Because I wasn't just going to haunt him. I was going to dismantle the entire story he told her about me, with facts, with quiet exposure, with his own actions unraveling in front of her eyes. Later that night, I had dinner at a little rooftop bistro. A trio played soft jazz in the corner. The moon was full, the wine crisp. I could have sat in bitterness, but I didn't, because I knew I was winning. Brandon thought I was a problem, but what he failed to understand was I was the architect of everything he stood on, and the cracks were beginning to show. In New Chapter, I sit down with Ashley. One conversation, one question, and everything begins to change. She came alone. Just after sunset, while the streets were quiet and the day tourists had thinned, I heard the soft knock on my door. I opened it slowly. Ashley stood there, her arms folded, eyes searching my face. "Hi, Mom," she said. I stepped aside. "Come in." She didn't move for a second. Then she walked past me into the suite, looking around like she wasn't sure she belonged. "I didn't know you were here," she said finally. "I know," I answered, gently. "You weren't supposed to." We sat out on the terrace. I offered her a glass of wine. She shook her head. She looked tired, not from travel, from something deeper, like the kind of exhaustion that comes when your reality starts to fray at the edges. I didn't ask her why she came. I let the silence stretch between us, warm and heavy. She finally spoke. Brandon said, "You misunderstood, that you panicked when we went for the drive, that we were coming right back. Did you believe him?" I asked. She looked down. I wanted to. I waited. She picked at her sleeve. "He said you were acting erratic, that you were tired, overwhelmed, that you made a scene at the front desk." "I didn't," I said softly. "I figured," she replied. And then she looked up at me. "Why didn't you call me?" Ah, the real question. I turned slightly in my chair so I could face her fully. "Because I wanted you to come on your own." She blinked. "I wanted to know," I said gently, "whether your silence was choice or blindness." Ashley's lips parted like she wanted to speak, but nothing came. So I asked her the question I'd been holding in my heart for days. "Do you really know the man you married?" That hit somewhere deep. I saw it, a flicker of pain. Not anger, not defense, something older. She leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring out over the rooftops. "I don't know anymore," she whispered. "Some days I feel like I'm talking to a stranger. Other days he's charming, smart, sweet. But there's always this edge, like if I push too far, everything cracks." I stayed quiet. Then she said something I didn't expect. "When we left you, something felt wrong. He said it was fine, that you'd be okay, but I couldn't stop thinking about how you looked that morning, like you knew." "I did," I said. "I knew he was up to something. I just didn't know you were part of it." "I wasn't," she said quickly. "I mean, not knowingly." And in that moment, I believed her. She sat back, sighing. "Why didn't you ever tell me? About the money, the company, who you really were?" I smiled softly. "Because I didn't want you to love me for any of that. I wanted to be your mother, just your mother." "But Brandon saw me as a threat," I finished. She nodded. "I think deep down," she said, "he's always resented how close we were, how much I leaned on you, how much you held things together." I reached over and took her hand. "You don't have to explain, sweetheart. I know how charm works. I know what it feels like to be gaslit, to be convinced that maybe you're just imagining things, that the problem is you." Tears welled in her eyes. And that's when I saw it. The shift. The start of the real story, finally taking shape. Not the one Brandon fed her, not the polite illusion. The truth. She stayed for a while. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about little things. Her boys, the garden she missed, a book she'd started but couldn't finish. And then, as she got up to leave, she paused at the door. "Do you want me to talk to him?" I stood, walked her to the threshold, and said simply, "Not yet. Watch him. Listen. Let him show you exactly who he is, without me getting in the way." She nodded, eyes serious now, older, and I knew. Ashley was beginning to wake up. In new chapter, Brandon tries to take control back, but the next dinner he walks into, I'm already sitting at the table, and I'm not alone. Brandon made the reservation. He always did that when he felt things slipping, tried to regain control through spectacle. Fancy setting, curated wine list, overpriced steak, flash over substance. He told Ashley it was a reconciliation dinner, a chance for everyone to reset, to put things behind us. She agreed, cautiously. And then she told me. "He wants to talk," she said. I simply nodded. "Will you come?" she asked. "Oh," I smiled, "I'll be there." What I didn't tell her was that I planned to arrive first. The restaurant was high on the cliff, known for its panoramic view of the sea and a dessert that looked like sculpture. I arrived 15 minutes early. The maitre d' recognized me. We'd met once, years ago, during a conference I sponsored in Naples. He greeted me with warm surprise. "Senora Wallace," he said with reverence, "your table is ready." I followed him, not to the corner table Brandon had booked, but to a better one, centered, unmissable. And I wasn't alone. Sitting beside me was Johnny Lombardi, a well-known name in the European hospitality world. Billionaire adjacent, discreet, sophisticated, owner of 3 hotels in Amalfi alone. We'd done business long ago when he was a young investor and I was one of the few women running international logistics across Europe. He owed me, and tonight he was repaying the favor. We didn't need to say much. He simply smiled and said, "Is this the gentleman we spoke about?" "Yes," I replied. Johnny's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then let's enjoy the show." At exactly 7:01, Brandon entered. Ashley was by his side, her hand loose in his, not clutched. He wore one of his tailored blazers, the kind that always made him stand a little taller. He spotted us instantly. I watched the moment his face shifted. Surprise, confusion, and then that tight smile, the one he reserved for when he was pretending not to panic. "Carol," he said as he approached, "didn't expect you to be here already." "I prefer not to keep people waiting," I said, motioning to the seats across from us. "Ashley, Brandon, please, join us." Ashley glanced at Johnny, surprised. Brandon clearly had no idea who he was, and that bothered him. "Sorry," Brandon said, trying to recover. "We had a reservation for 3. "Now it's for 4, I said. "I hope that's not a problem." He didn't answer. Dinner began quietly. Johnny chatted with Ashley, asking about her travels, her favorite views, her garden back home. Brandon sat stiffly, trying to read him, trying to place him. I watched the gears turn. He wanted to ask, but didn't want to reveal that he didn't know. That tension, it was delicious. Eventually, Johnny excused himself to take a call. And that's when Brandon leaned in. "What exactly are you doing?" he whispered, his tone low and sharp. I replied, cutting into my risotto. "You're playing games." I looked up, calm. "You left me in a foreign country with no passport, no money, no explanation, and now I'm the one playing games?" Ashley's fork paused midair. Brandon's jaw tightened. I was going to explain, but you didn't. I made a mistake. I sipped my wine. "No, Brandon, a mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. You made a plan." Ashley looked between us. Her voice was quiet. "You planned to leave her?" Brandon shifted. "It wasn't like that. She's twisting this." "Then explain it," I said, softly. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because there was nothing left to twist. And for the first time, I saw it. The mask cracking, the persona unraveling. Not from shouting, not from threats, from truth. Johnny returned. Brandon didn't speak much after that. Ashley did. She asked questions. She brought up things he thought she'd forgotten. The missed bills, the shifting stories, the way her friendships quietly dried up since their wedding. Brandon barely touched his food. When dessert came, a delicate lemon mousse towered in sugar, he declined. I didn't, because I'd earned this sweetness. Dash. In new chapter, Ashley finds something Brandon had hidden in his suitcase, and with one look, she finally understands. The next morning, Ashley woke up early. The bed beside her was empty. Brandon had gone for one of his clearing my head walks, the kind he always took when cornered. But she didn't feel like waiting for explanations anymore. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the sunlight trickling through the curtains. The air was warm, still, and heavy with questions. Last night had shaken her, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Brandon hadn't denied anything, not truly. And now, every silence they'd ever shared echoed louder. She looked toward the closet. His suitcase was sitting there, unzipped, the one he never let her pack, never let her touch. She stood slowly, crossed the room, and opened it. Inside, it was tidy, too tidy. Rolled shirts, a separate pouch for toiletries, a folder tucked under the flap. She hesitated, then reached for it. It wasn't locked. The folder opened with a quiet snap, revealing papers, notes, travel confirmations, and a single sheet that made her stomach turn. Drop Carol off in a Amalfi hotel. Tell her you'll be back in 30 minutes. Book car service out of town under different name. Leave no contact details at front desk. She blinked. Once. Twice. Her breath caught. This wasn't a miscommunication. This wasn't panic or poor judgment. This was a plan. Her hands trembled. She turned the page. Another note. A rough email draft to someone labeled MJ Agency. Mother-in-law too involved. Can't focus with her around. Need her out for good. Trip gives us excuse to reposition family structure. May extend stay if successful. Reposition family structure? Ashley sat down on the edge of the bed, the papers limp in her hands. This wasn't just betrayal. This was manipulation of her, of their marriage, of her mother. And all of it wrapped in Brandon's smooth words and smug control. She thought back to every moment that now felt different. When Brandon rolled his eyes behind her mother's back. When he interrupted her stories. When he told Ashley that her mom was too much, needy, old-fashioned. How many times had she defended him? He's just stressed. Mom's overreacting. He doesn't mean it like that. But now, she saw it. The way he chipped away at her loyalties. How he isolated her, one tiny cut at a time. And how her mother never once fought back. She just stayed kind, stayed helpful, stayed there, even when they didn't deserve her. Ashley folded the papers and placed them in her purse. Then she opened her own suitcase. Quietly, deliberately, she packed. Only what she needed, not in panic, in clarity. She wrote a short note, not for him, for herself. I believed in the wrong person, but not anymore. She left it on the nightstand. An hour later, Brandon returned, sweaty and annoyed. He called her name once. No answer. Checked the bathroom. Empty. Then he saw the closet. Open. Half full. And the nightstand. When he read the note, he didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just stood still, like a man watching a fire he lit finally reach his own house. Ashley didn't go far. She walked up the hill. And when she knocked on the door of her mother's hotel room, she wasn't a daughter looking for refuge. She was a woman reclaiming truth. Carol opened the door, saw the suitcase, and said nothing. She just opened her arms. Ashley stepped into them, and for the first time in years, they both exhaled. The car wound higher and higher, the narrow road clinging to the cliffs like a ribbon stitched through clouds. Ashley sat beside me, quiet. She hadn't asked where we were going. She hadn't needed to. She just looked out the window with that same expression I remembered from her childhood, when she'd climb into the car after a bad day at school, eyes red, trying not to cry. But this wasn't a schoolyard fight. This was her marriage unraveling. And I could feel the heaviness of it in every breath she took. I didn't speak until the gates appeared. Tall, iron, covered in ivy. No signs, no numbers. Only a stone archway with 2 letters carved into it. C.W. Ashley glanced at them. Her brow furrowed. She turned to me. C.W.? Carol Wallace, I said softly. Before I was anyone's mother, before I was your grandmother's daughter, just me. The gates opened silently, and behind them the road bent one last time and opened into a small estate, elegant, aged, bathed in sunlight. Olive trees lined the path, bougainvillea poured from the walls. A breeze carried hints of lemon and sea. Ashley stared. You own this? For 23 years, I nodded. Bought it the year after I signed the deal that changed everything. It was the one thing I kept completely to myself. Why? I smiled. Because everyone wanted a piece of me. This place was the first thing I had that no one touched. No board meetings, no press, no family drama. Just me. We stepped out of the car. She followed me up the stone steps into the house, cool, sun-dappled, full of quiet echoes. There were no servants, no distractions, just the sound of seabirds and distant waves. Ashley walked slowly through the main room, her hand brushing the smooth wood of the banister, the carved marble archway, the velvet curtain half pulled from the terrace. This is... She didn't finish the sentence, because she was realizing something. That her mother, the woman she thought she knew, had an entire world she'd never seen. We sat outside under a lemon tree. I poured iced water into glass tumblers and set a bowl of olives between us. Ashley looked down at her hands. Then, finally, she said, "I don't know who I married." "I do," I said quietly. She looked up. "I saw it before you did. I didn't say anything for a long time because I was afraid of pushing you further into his arms. Sometimes when a mother says, 'Be careful,' a daughter hears, 'I don't trust your judgment.'" Her eyes filled. "I let him change me," she whispered. "Little by little. I stopped calling you, stopped asking your advice. I started believing the stories he told me about you being needy or dramatic." I reached across the table and touched her hand. "You didn't let him. He worked hard for it. He knew exactly how to isolate you. That's not weakness. That's what manipulation looks like." We sat in silence for a moment. The air was warm, the trees rustled gently. It was peace, but not the kind that forgets pain, the kind that honors it. Then Ashley asked something I didn't expect. "How did you build all this? The company, the money, this life?" I never really asked before. I smiled. "Because I didn't want you growing up thinking money was the goal. I wanted you to know how to live with integrity first. Everything else came later." She leaned in. "Tell me now." So I did. I told her about the warehouse job I worked after her father left, how I learned supply chains like the back of my hand, how I studied every night after she went to sleep, how I borrowed money from a friend to launch a cross-border shipping route no one believed in, and how that single route turned into a network that spanned 3 continents. I told her about the failures, the lawsuits, the deals I walked away from, the people I helped, and the ones who tried to take me down. And finally, the moment I walked into a room of 12 men in suits and sold my company for $20 million without raising my voice once. Ashley sat wide-eyed, silent, processing. "You were a CEO?" she whispered. I chuckled, among other things. She stood and walked to the edge of the terrace, looking out at the vastness of the sea. "I wish I'd known." "You weren't supposed to," I said. "You were supposed to feel safe enough to become yourself, not a reflection of me." She turned. "But now I want to know. I want to know everything, because you're the woman I should have been listening to all along." She paused. "And I think it's time I stop letting men with fragile egos write the narrative of my life." I stood, walked to her side, and put an arm around her shoulder. "Then let's start rewriting it, together." She leaned into me, and the weight that had settled between us for years, unspoken, unchallenged, finally lifted. Later that evening, we sat on the back patio with tea and warm bread. No phones, no distractions, just the 2 of us, mother and daughter, and the knowledge that for the first time in years, we weren't just family, we were allies. In New Chapter, Brandon makes one last desperate move, but I arrive first, and this time I bring lawyers. Brandon always came back when he felt like he was losing. He didn't apologize, he didn't explain, he just showed up, loud enough to distract, slick enough to confuse. But this time, he didn't come to apologize. He came for money. It started with a call from Ashley's bank. "We received an urgent request to transfer funds from your joint account," the manager said. "Quite a large amount." Ashley looked at me, her face pale. She hadn't authorized anything. "He's panicking," I said calmly, "and when men like Brandon panic, they reach for the rope they think they still hold." Ashley nodded, but her hands were shaking. I squeezed them gently. "Don't worry, I've already made arrangements." That afternoon, we returned to town. Ashley thought we were just meeting with a notary to freeze the joint accounts. But when we entered the office, a woman in a navy suit and heels stood waiting with a portfolio in hand. Ashley blinked. "Mom, who?" "This is Elisa," I said, "my European legal counsel." Elisa extended her hand. "I specialize in estate security, marital disentanglements, and asset protection," she said with a warm smile. "I believe we're going to be great friends." Meanwhile, Brandon was across town, pacing inside a bank lobby, yelling into his phone, demanding wire confirmations and access codes that suddenly no longer worked. By the time he stormed into our notary's office an hour later, we were already sitting at the table, documents prepared. He burst through the door like a man still pretending he had leverage. "Ashley, what the hell is this?" She didn't flinch. "You tried to empty our accounts," she said, "behind my back." Brandon scoffed. "Because I knew you were being manipulated. She's poisoning you against me." "No," Ashley said firmly, "you did that all by yourself." He turned to me. "And you think dragging her into your little power games makes you noble?" I set my pen down and looked him in the eye. "You planned to abandon me in a foreign country," I said. "You stole my identification, you erased me, and then you tried to bleed my daughter dry." He opened his mouth to argue, but Elisa raised a hand. "Mr. Hayes, may I remind you that your prenuptial agreement, which you signed and notarized in 2017, contains a full clause on financial misconduct." His face twitched. "You can't prove anything." "Oh, we can," Elisa said, "because you used your own name on several failed business registrations, one of which was funded through a wire originating from the marital account." Ashley's eyes widened. This was news to her. Brandon swallowed. I leaned forward. "And here's the best part," I said softly. "That clause you never cared to read? It includes a stipulation that in the event of fraud, the other party retains full financial rights to any and all jointly held assets, and the initiator forfeits any claims to spousal support." Brandon looked like he'd been slapped. "That's not fair," he muttered. "No," I said. "What you did, that wasn't fair. This is just consequences." Ashley slid the folder across the table. Inside, an immediate separation request, power of attorney for financial isolation, and legal notice of intention to divorce. Brandon stared at it, then at Ashley. "You're really doing this?" She nodded. "I believed in you," she said. "I built a life with you, but you made me feel like I was losing my mind. You pushed my mother out because you couldn't stand how much she saw. You tried to erase the one person who truly had my back, and now you've tried to steal from me." He stood up suddenly, shoving the chair back. "You'll regret this," he said, "both of you." Elisa raised an eyebrow. "Not legally, we won't." Brandon stared at me one last time, his eyes full of something like hatred or fear. But I didn't move, didn't gloat, didn't smile. I just said, "Goodbye, Brandon," and meant it. When the door closed behind him, Ashley exhaled like she hadn't breathed in days. I stood and hugged her, not as a warrior, not as a businesswoman, just as her mother. "You're free now," I whispered. And for the first time since this trip began, she smiled without pain. That night, we returned to the villa. Ashley sat under the lemon trees with a glass of wine, watching the stars come out. I joined her. "You really had a prenup?" she asked. "Oh, honey," I said, sipping. "I insisted, and I paid for the lawyer myself, just to be sure." Ashley laughed, a real laugh, loud and from the belly. "You really are that woman." I winked. "Took you long enough to notice." The villa was quiet the next morning. Not the tense kind of quiet, not the kind full of unsaid things and walking on eggshells. It was true quiet, peaceful, solid, earned. Ashley stood barefoot on the terrace, wrapped in one of my old linen robes. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot. She held a cup of tea and watched the sunrise over the hills, pink and gold spilling into the sky. She looked different. Not like a victim, not even like a survivor. She looked like someone who had come home, not just to a place, but to herself. Over breakfast, we didn't talk about Brandon. We talked about lemons, about the olive trees I'd planted years ago, about the local stray cat that kept circling the garden like she owned the place. Then, as the morning settled in, Ashley asked, "Do you think I can really start over?" I looked at her, really looked, and what I saw wasn't brokenness. I saw strength that had gone unnoticed, a woman who had bent too long and finally stopped bending. "I don't think," I said. "I know." She nodded slowly. "I'd like to go back to school," she said. "Not for a job, just for me. I want to learn again, feel like I have my own mind." I smiled. "I know a university dean in Florence," I said casually. "Owes me a favor from a shipping grant I funded." Ashley blinked. "Of course you do." We laughed. Later that day, I made a quiet call to New York. "Move the funds," I told my investment manager. "Split the Italian properties into 2 trusts, one in my name, one in my daughter's." He didn't question me. He never did. And when he asked if I wanted to formally update my will, I said, "No, rewrite it." Because Brandon would never see a dime. But Ashley, she'd finally know what it felt like to have support without strings. That evening, we went down to town for dinner. Not to hide, not to avoid him, to reclaim it. We sat at the same cafe where Brandon once tried to impress everyone around him. This time, we ordered without hesitation. Ashley wore white, I wore navy. And when the waiter brought us dessert, Ashley raised her glass. "To moms who don't stay silent," she said, "and to daughters who finally learn how to listen." I clinked her glass gently. "To new beginnings," I said, "and well-earned endings." As the sky darkened, we walked along the waterfront. No plans, no deadlines. Just 2 women who had finally removed the weight of someone else's expectations. Ashley slipped her hand into mine. "I think I was afraid of becoming you," she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Yes," she smiled. "And now I realize that's the best thing I could have become." I squeezed her hand. Not for thanks, for everything we'd come through. Back at the villa, I sat alone for a few minutes, watching the stars. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who scraped her way through warehouses, boardrooms, betrayal, and motherhood. I thought about the woman who built a life in the shadows because it felt safer than being seen. And now, I was seen by the one person I needed most. Not because I shouted, not because I punished, but because I stayed, I stood, I endured. And in the end, I won. In New Chapter, I return home, but someone unexpected is waiting for me at the airport with an apology I never thought I'd hear. The plane touched down just after sunset. From the window, the city lights sparkled like a carpet of fireflies, warm, distant, familiar. It wasn't just the end of a trip. It felt like the end of an era, and the beginning of something I hadn't felt in a long time: ease. Ashley squeezed my hand as the wheels hit the runway. "We're really doing it," she whispered. "Yes," I smiled, "we really are." Customs was easy. The new passports were crisp, untouched. Ashley's face was steady as she moved through the airport, head high, suitcase rolling behind her, like she had somewhere to be and someone to be. And then, just as we stepped into the arrivals hall, I saw him, leaning casually against the railing, older now, silver at his temples, a bouquet of simple wildflowers in his hand. Thomas Grant. My breath caught, just slightly. We hadn't spoken in over 15 years, not since I turned down his offer to partner on an overseas logistics hub because Ashley had just started high school and I wasn't willing to uproot her life again. We'd left on respectful terms, but I remembered the way he used to look at me, like he saw exactly what I was capable of, even when I hadn't seen it yet. He stepped forward. "Carol Wallace," he said with a slow smile, "still walking like you own every room you enter." I raised an eyebrow. Some things don't change. Ashley looked between us, amused. "Should I give you two a minute?" "No," I said, "you should hear this." Thomas handed me the flowers. Not roses, not drama, just sun-warmed, honest blooms. "I heard what happened," he said, "and I heard how you handled it." I tilted my head. "Word travels." "In our world," he chuckled, "you're a legend, always were." Ashley blinked. He continued, "I know it's late, but I've got something for you, a consulting offer. One of my companies is expanding in the Southeast. No title, no pressure, just a seat at the table if you want it." I paused, looked at Ashley. She nodded, smiling. "You should say yes." "I'm not sure I want to be at a table anymore," I said. "Maybe just near a window, with coffee and people I trust." Thomas laughed. Deal. Outside, the night air was warm. We didn't go straight home. We stopped by a diner Ashley loved as a teenager, ordered pancakes and fries at 9 p.m. like it was normal, because maybe now it was. She talked about the online courses she'd already registered for. I told her about the scholarship fund I was setting up in the name of my own mother, who never finished school but raised a CEO. No talk of Brandon, no bitterness, just life, fresh and real and untouched by old shadows. Later, as I settled into bed, home, finally, I looked around at the walls I once thought were closing in. They weren't. They were holding me. And I realized Brandon never trapped me. I just hadn't opened the gate yet. Now I had. And on the other side was peace. Not revenge, not noise, just quiet dignity. Earned and undeniable. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what was your favorite moment, and what would you have done in my place? I read every word, and remember, quiet women aren't weak, they're just preparing their moment.